Hey guys, so unfortunately the rate of depression and to some extent suicide has been on the rise. We all know why, because we are going through a lot right now, and sometimes we're able to fight and sometimes we're not. That's human nature. A lot of it though has to do with perception. The way we see ourselves, the way we see our future, and the way we see our environment. And there is a direct correlation between perception and the so-called feelings that we have. In this case, let's say it's either hope or it's either depression. Two sides of the spectrum. But let's look at perception. At its core, perception is a bundle of thoughts that have been thought for a period of time based on either what the environment has been telling us or what our inner belief is. It all starts though when we are born and when we're kids, and we perceive things that are in our environment, and as a result we start gradually building those thoughts, and those thoughts translates then gradually into what we believe our world to be and what we believe ourselves to be. And a lot of these perception, as the time goes by, becomes extremely hard to penetrate and to change, just because it creates a shield of thought patterns in terms of waves, like a mist around your physical body. I call it a mist. And that mist becomes our glasses that we see lives through. That's why it's very extremely difficult to change somebody's belief system or influence it, because it is a pretty protective shield, mist of energy, mist of vibration that is around each and every one of us. The way that it could potentially become cracked, I call it creating a crack in the midst of the perception, is, for example, through a trauma. Something that it's so drastic that sort of brings the person's attention so holistically towards that thing that we either question our beliefs, or we start thinking that we need to do something about it. Other than that, it's very hard to change. And so at its very core, the perception, aka belief system, whatever you want to call it, it's very strong. It's a very strong magnetic field around each and every one of us that has been challenged now because of COVID. That's why the trauma that all of us globally are going through is powerful enough such that it changes, or at least forces some of us, if not many people, to start thinking differently, adapting different actions, doing different things, and also shifting their state of being, maybe from a person who's really hopeful, who used to be very hopeful, towards somebody that maybe is now depressed and is not motivated or inspired to pretty much do anything because they feel disempowered. And all that has to do with how we perceive everything. Now, perception like everything else, can be explained at a quantum level. Those of you who are familiar with some of my work know that my background is in neuroscience, so I'm not in quantum physics or quantum mechanics or anything quantum science related, but for my postdoc I'm bringing those in as well. But my own background is in neuroscience, information science, and cognitive psychology, so I bring it all together. But at a quantum level, what I'm learning from the brilliant physicists that have been in the past and they're still working on this brilliant work is that at the quantum level we do have something called particle, and a particle essentially is something that is smaller than an atom or that a molecule. These are just man-made names that we're using to be able to identify and to be able to communicate. There is nothing magical about these words, that names that we're using. It's just for the communication's sake. So a particle is something that is smaller. So in an atom, an electron can be named a particle. And we all know that energy at a quantum level is the dance of electrons within an atom. So it would be the dance of the particles in this case within that atom, and all that dance, I call it dance because it's more fun to call it dance, but it's actually it changes position from the orbit that it's circulating around. That's at least what we know today. I mean, we are evolving, so things will change, but nonetheless that shift is what creates energy. And at that level, that is where communication happens. The science of quantum, the quantum science in general is extremely new. It's in its infancy, but it will come a time where we are able to measure. We have a lot of theories. The only reason we're not moving forward as fast is because we still don't have devices to measure them. And just because science is so strict about measuring every goddamn thing, and they sometimes think things to death, we're moving very slow. But once we start getting those devices, we'll be able to show that at that level is where communication happens. And that's what has been made me obsessed for the past 10 years to study those type of communication that happens at a quantum level. And so let's go back to perception at quantum level, and that is exactly what it is. It is a continuous thought, and a thought is a point of energy. A thought is a point of these vibrational electrons at that level that is repeated. So it's repeatedly emanating this field that then becomes the mist of energy and electromagnetic field around each person that we call perception or belief system. And so that can really influence our lives. So tie that back in to the feelings of, or perception of hope, or perception of my life is over and I'm depressed. All that has to do with how these fields around us is making us look at and interpret everything that we see and everything we know about ourselves and about the world. And because of that, an inner strength or urge to change our perception, especially when we are in those negative modes, can absolutely make or break our lives. Because a little ripple effect, like you throw a stone in the water, can have and will have the ripple effect, but it needs to start with a thought, and that thought is what will accelerate the energy at the quantum level of the electrons such that it becomes a ripple effect within us, and that could potentially change the perception. So, but that needs to come from the person. So let's say hypothetically that we come to a moment where we are extremely depressed. It's extremely hard to get a person who is very depressed out of that depression unless it starts with one thought that can change the perception. I call it creating a crack in the midst of the field of perception around the person. And it's starting with that point is what is hard, and keeping it at that, because when we are extremely depressed, and a lot of people are because everything else that is going on around the world, we tend to spiral down, and the more in depth we go, it's like a spiral, we go down and down and down, then it's going to be harder to get up. And so for that reason, it's extremely important, and it's more efficient to not go down. As soon as we feel that we're going down, we do something that we kind of change that perception, create a crack in that perception a little. Because otherwise, if we wait too long and we go too way down the spiral of these depression and negative feeling, we will still be able to get up, but it's just going to be harder because it needs more effort, and it needs much more energy. So if you know of somebody in your environment, or if you feel it yourself a little bit, it's very important to be mindful of that, to maybe help others. And one way we can realize that somebody is going through that, or at least starting to go through that, or maybe it's ourselves that are going through that, it's the lack of energy that translates into lack of movement, because movement is a sign of life. If you think about it, whenever we say that something is dead, the first way that we can tell something is dead is lack of movement, because there's lack of energy. There is lack of electrons at the quantum level moving around. They stop moving, at least the way we see it. And so that is one of the first symptoms that we see when we start feeling sad or potentially depressed, is that we move a little bit less in our thoughts. I don't mean necessarily moving in our bodies, but so if you compare somebody who is, let's say, upset about something versus somebody who is depressed about something, the way that they act is totally different. The person who's upset gets up and shouts. The person who's depressed sits there and does nothing. So in that sense, it's actually better to be upset, because there's still hope in being upset and being mad at the world or whoever who's doing all these things to us. It's actually better than being depressed, because there's still some signs of hope. Obviously that may have negative ramification, but you know what I mean. I think you get what I mean. So what I'm trying to say is that if you feel these feelings, or somebody that you know in your environment has these feelings, and we already talked about some of the symptoms, it's very important that you stop it as soon as you realize it. And there are ways in which you can do it, and not stopping feeling, but stopping going down the spiral. Those are very different, because otherwise the spiral of these energy around us which sort of consume us, and then it's very hard to get out, and God forbid some people end up hurting themselves. So think about it at a quantum level. And the parts that I'm writing also on perception on my upcoming little mini ebook slash volume, I'm talking about it at a quantum level as well. Not many people do that, and I think we need to think about it that way more, because in the future of humanity is going to be, if not all of it, but most of it is going to be at an energetic level. We are at the verge of evolution to the next level of humanity. And the quicker we understand ourselves at a quantum level, the faster we will be able to adapt to it. And I'm also talking about adaptability, by the way, at evolution, because evolution at the quantum level is not what Darwin was saying about, the survival of the fittest. Is actually at the quantum level is very different. So think about it, guys. And if it sits in you, what I say, that means is the truth for you. So think about it. The things that I present, I present it such that you think about it yourself. I think in our world, we are being told a lot, as opposed to being presented with things such that we start thinking. Every single one of us has been given the gifts of cells and brains, and the way they work together, the way they communicate with each other is just freaking amazing. And I'm always at awe. I'm like, how the F do you know what to do? I talk to myself like that. But we are all equipped with these gifts that we don't even know how they function. And so we owe it to ourselves to think, to really, really become a thinker that is morally good. We need those people. And hopefully we'll conquer the 1%, all of us together. So I hope this was helpful to you. More specifically, I hope these made you think. And I have more stuff to share, hopefully in the future. Thanks so much.